Happy New Year and welcome to Hobbservation Point Live. I am your host, Chuck Hobbs. I'm bringing in a few of my friends from the HBCU world. I have this evening my Spelman sister, Ayanna Hakwins, my Morehouse brother and Florida homeboy, Jason Hayes. Also have Monica Harris here with us from FAMU and Ursula Holmes, my Spelman sister as well. Welcome to the show. We have a lot to jump into here at the first of the year. And I want to do less talking and more listening this evening. So right off the bat, let's start off with anarchy in the Capitol last week. Ayanna, you're up there in Washington, D.C. I'm going to ask each of you panelists your gut reaction of what you thought as you watched anarchy unfold before our very eyes last Wednesday. Ayanna, I want you to take it first. Go ahead.
All right. Okay. There's several different reactions. So the first reaction is disgust and just frustration.
As you watched anarchy unfold.
Okay. Oh, the first reaction was disgust. The second reaction was relief because I was actually headed over to the Capitol. So my daughter's class meets for playground time outside about a block behind the Capitol on the Senate side. So we actually had just decided to reschedule that. And I was saying, okay, great, I can watch this unfold as I'm watching the Electoral College deliberations unfold. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, just imagine if we hadn't been attuned and paying attention to what was happening. So, I mean, those are my initial two reactions. I used to work on Capitol Hill, so I'm also watching this in disbelief because I remember how difficult it was to access different parts of the Capitol in the aftermath of a shooting that took place. And I don't know if anybody remembers this. It was in 1998, so a long time ago, where there were two Capitol police officers who were shot and killed by a gunman that breached that basically went past the security. And it created a lot of, obviously it was a tragic situation. It was, I think they were the first two casualties in the line of duty, and just the entire sort of security apparatus changed as a result of that. So it just shocked me to see that these people, first of all, in some footage, were being let in by the Capitol Police through a door that usually wouldn't open. And then on the other end, of course, it was even more disturbing to see people using their flags and using their, scaling the building and using the flags to break in through the windows. So just the entire scene unfolding, disgust, dismay, and then, just now we're sort of questioning what happened and how did this happen? So those are my initial reactions.
Understood. Ursula, I know that you had a lot to say about it last week on social media. I want you to get it off your chest now here on Hobbservation Point Live. What were you thinking as you saw all of the mayhem unfold before your very eyes?
Well, most of it, Chuck, I can't say on this post at all, for obvious reasons. I want you to be able to continue to be online. If I express some of that stuff, I don't think you'd be online for long. I had a feeling it was coming. I remember that particular day, I had gotten like 5, 6 texts before I started watching. I can't remember what I was doing at work. I knew one of the things I was doing was getting ready for a meeting with my supervisor. And, everybody was like, are you watching this? And I already knew it was something that I didn't need to watch because I wasn't surprised by Donald Trump's antics. And I think that's what irritates me most about all this. People are acting like they were surprised that he went to the lengths that he went to on Wednesday. And all the indications that he was crazy were there. I mean, they've been there for a while. I mean, they've been talking about January 6th for quite some time. So you knew something was going to happen. I think what irritated me most was the response to it by law enforcement. And I think everybody agrees, had that been one of us or a group of us, none of that would. Can you imagine a group of Black people breaking out a window in the Capitol building? Can you imagine a group of Black people breaking into the offices of members of Congress and being alive to talk about it and to tweet about it and to post about it? Can you really wrap your arms around that? And then you get on social media and you have members of the opposite race, I'll say, you know, who are just completely downplaying the whole thing. Like, these people are peaceably assembling. You know, I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. It reminded me, because you said you wanted us to be real today.
Absolutely.
It reminded me of the chick who knew she was dating a hoe, but she's going out of her way to justify his actions at every turn when everybody knows that she's dating a hoe. You know, and so that's what it reminded me of. I'm like, how many excuses are you all gonna make for this fool? And at what point will it stop? You know, I mean, I just got to a point where I just really, and I'm pretty sure you saw I actually went through my page, and anything that mentioned him, I deleted, because I decided he didn't deserve my energy, and he didn't deserve any place on my page, because he doesn't deserve a place in the highest office of the country.
No, I'm right there with you, Ursula. And I know that we want to get into that a little bit this evening during our segment with regards to the hold that this particular president has had on not only his supporters, but more important to me, Republicans that are political officials themselves. Jason, I want to talk to you a little bit about just that. When you're talking about what happened last week, I know that I made a big fuss on my page, as did many of you, with regards to how it seemed so easy for these rebellious anarchists to maneuver through the Capitol building. Ayanna just talked about it at the top of the hour in regards to years ago, there was a Black woman who was killed just being near, I believe, by the Capitol Police, being near the White House or the Capitol. I'm not quite sure which place it was, but she was shot just coming near in her car. Whereas these ones were able to, it was almost like matadors were at the door, just letting them come right on in. And so with that in mind, Jason, has it disappointed you or has it shocked you that it took even Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, some of the stalwart leaders of the Republican Party so long to finally say enough? Take it away, Jason.
No, and no. Like none of it. None of it was surprising at all. Listen, Trump hyped that concert since November. You know what I'm saying? So I guess I was kind of surprised that nobody was there, because it was like, this dude been promoting this thing for like 2 months now. So I thought at a minimum they would have had the National Guard on standby, you know, people expecting things to get rowdy. And so when things got crazy, and then it's like no resistance, I'm like, dude, I mean, how is this even possible? So it went from like not being surprised, because I knew they were coming, I knew that they were going to do exactly what they did, to disgust to see that they were allowed to just casually walk into the Capitol, man, you know, and tear things up and roam freely, and there was nobody there to say anything to them. And lastly, it was all made possible by the people that you mentioned, the Mitch McConnells, the Lindsey Grahams, the Marco Rubios, the Ted Cruzes, that jackass, you know, from Missouri, because they coddled this dude. They enabled him to be who he was, because they knew he had a following, and they trying to ride the wave to cash in on whatever lunatic friends that he has in order to further their political futures. So given how opportunistic Republicans have always been and continue to be, I'm not surprised at all that they did any of it.
Understood. And with that, Monica, let me turn to you. Happy New Year, sis. When we're talking about, Jason was just talking about the Republican leaders, and you can take a stab at that as well. But I also want you to analyze from your perspective the typical Trump follower. And I know some people consider the word typical to be a pejorative, and I'm trying to be somewhat pejorative. It's beyond the pale, the concept of stop the steal, the entire lie. At what point in time do normal, rational people start to realize that there was no truth to this stop the steal, the election was rigged? Go ahead and take it, Monica.
Well, Happy New Year. I don't think it stops until we know Trump's not going to do it, but until someone else in leadership that folks on his end trust say it. I mean, Lindsey Graham at the very least, and I hate to even give him any kudos, during the debate on the floor about the certification of electoral college, at least came out and said on the floor that, you know, that this is nothing, say nothing burger. And y'all saw what happened to him in South Carolina. I actually went on my Facebook page and I had to dispel some rumors, because I think there is a misconception that the people that are supporting Trump are rednecks, no teeth, having incestuous white folks. Just, you know, since we're keeping it real this evening, those are the type of people that are supporting Trump. But I've said all along that, you know, 74 million people supported him, knowing all that they've known for the last 4 years. I'm going with every other third white person is probably someone who supported Trump. So that would include the people that you work with on a regular basis. There were CEOs, there were doctors, there were lawyers, there were former military, there were off-duty police officers. So the folks that support Trump are people that are looking for someone to co-sign their belief that they're victims of some sort. And anybody that's an other, because they haven't achieved whatever they want to achieve, and as an other, is responsible for their lot in life. And so what Trump has given them is a sounding board and someone to articulate their griefs and their frustrations. And that runs the gamut. It's not just poor white people that feel that type of frustration. It's rich white folks too. And so to answer your specific question, it's not going to change. He is, as Jason said, people have enabled him for the last, frankly, 5 years. I include the media in that because people are on spade. None of this shocked me. None of this was surprising, because, as Ursula said, this is something that's been in the works for a long time. And Stevie Wonder could have seen this was going to happen on Wednesday. I was probably more bothered by the fact that they got to the Senate chambers and were sitting at Mike Pence's desk. So that was probably more problematic for me. But these are colleagues. These are people, as a lawyer, these are every other lawyer. There are lawyers that were in DC and people who should lose their bar license for being involved in that foolishness. So there are lawyers, there are doctors. White supremacy is real. And it's not just poor white have monopoly on white supremacy. You got a whole lot of rich white folks that will say that they voted for Donald Trump because of the tax breaks, but in reality, they voted for him because they were giving voice to the issues that they've had forever.
No, that's real talk. And in addition to that, I would add that there were even a number of military personnel. I read earlier today that there was a woman stationed at Fort Bragg in North Carolina who was a captain who actually was there, claiming that she was there exercising her First Amendment rights. That will be interesting to see whether or not she gets discharged dishonorably. I've read that she was already preparing to resign her commission later this year, but it will be interesting to see if she gets brought up for a court martial at some point in time. We also know that there was the retired Air Force lieutenant colonel that was there. He was the one with the zip ties, I believe, in the Senate chamber and what have you. And so when you consider that, when you think of the fact that there was a guillotine that was erected, not a guillotine, I'm sorry, there was a hangman's platform that was erected outside, you have to ask yourself how serious some of these ones really were with regards to the anarchy piece. And again, that's one of the things that has frustrated me the most over the course of the last 5 days, is listening to so many people try to dodge and deflect. For the life of me, I don't understand why people who I know to be smart thinking individuals, okay, they may be conservatives, they may have been Republicans all their lives, but they have bought into a cult-like mentality here that I just can't understand with regards to he lost. It was clear that he lost. There was no evidence of any widespread steal. He lost 60 of the 61 lawsuits that he filed. Many of those lawsuits he lost that were heard by judges that were appointed by Donald Trump. And so the question has to be, if he actually had evidence, don't you think that these judges who are conservatives, who are appointed by Trump, actually would have propped up his position that there was evidence that the election was stolen? They did not, because there was no evidence of that. And yet you still have a whole heap of Americans who actually want to believe it. But even beyond that, they saw what was going on last week and they still will not condemn the president for the words that he said, stoking it last Wednesday. I believe Mo Brooks, the representative from up in Alabama, was equally complicit in stoking what happened last Wednesday. Rudy Giuliani up there talking about trial by combat. I mean, we saw it coming, but it's only until you actually see it can you actually sometimes believe the foolishness that we witnessed last week. With that, Ayanna, do you have any concerns, being a DC native, about what might happen next week? We recognize that it's inauguration week. What are your concerns about all of the tough talk that we are already seeing, that many of these militia individuals saying they are coming back? Ayanna?
Well, I know that the city has started to request, well, the city did request that the National Park Service cancel the request for the permits that had been made for gatherings. And so they knew that there were going to be counter protests. They've actually gone ahead and they've requested that those get canceled. And I know that I was listening to something last week where they were talking about how typically, because of the First Amendment, they generally grant most of the requests. The National Park Service does. I think that that's going to probably get canceled. I know that the Biden inauguration activities are generally virtual. I mean, part of that is because of COVID, but also I think that in the interest of public safety, certainly those events are being moved to different platforms. But I think the broader concern for me is that obviously, yes, we're concerned about those specific dates where we know that there's something that can be planned around a specific date. We know that there can be something planned for the 20th. We know that there could be something planned for that weekend preceding that. I'm thinking beyond. And I think that, I'm hoping that the people who were not paying attention, or people who sort of knew that something was happening, but then downplayed it, are certainly paying closer attention to what people are saying on these dark websites or on these different public or social media sites where they're actually planning in the open, where people took for granted that the plans were out there and that they're actually paying attention to it. I mean, we have intelligence, we certainly talk about the chatter where we're paying attention to, what may be going up with Al-Qaeda, or what may be going up in different parts of the world in terms of terror cells. Well, now they know that this is that domestic terrorism is a serious threat in the United States, and that if they could go and destroy the people's house, who's to say that they aren't going to take out or try to take out other people? So I know that, we've talked, I think informally, we're hoping that Secret Service details are on their game. I mean, we knew how they were protecting Obama and how people were paying attention to that. We know we certainly have to pay closer attention to that even now, not just for President Biden, but certainly for Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as well. So I think those are our concerns moving in, is that everyone has to take these threats very seriously. It's not enough to discount white supremacy as it's a friend. I mean, because clearly what we saw last week is that domestic terrorism is mainstream, and it's dangerous, and we just have to take it seriously.
Monica, you wanted to weigh back in. I'm sorry I didn't get you before I went to Ayanna. Go ahead, Monica.
It's okay. I wanted to comment on what you said about the why, answer the why. And I just think people just need to call spades spades. It's racism. What you have is a group of white folks that understand that their majority hold, this concept of white supremacy and their majority hold on institutions is coming to an end because people of color are becoming the majority. So they're upset because if you look at the presidential election, those precincts in those counties where that allowed Joe Biden to win were counties that were predominated by Black people. In Georgia, what flipped Georgia was DeKalb County, which is Black people. So to me, what we're seeing is a group of individuals who are terrified about what can happen in this country when the quote unquote minority becomes the majority, and their belief is that because of the terrorism that they've inflicted upon people of color since this inception of the country, that we are going to do like them and seek some type of physical retribution. And they are terrified of that. That's my belief, because that's the only thing that makes sense. These people, they are following along. I cannot believe that people who are degreed and educated are following along with this foolishness and perpetuating things that they know are lies. You got lawyers who are co-signing the fact that there's been a steal, and lawyers, we function in evidence and facts. Yeah. If there are facts, then present them, but they haven't done that. And so I believe that what we're seeing is a manifestation of real fear by white folks of people of color coming into power, and they're concerned about what will happen once we have the control of power in this country. And that's what we're seeing, and that's what we saw on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Jason, one of the things that has interested me is that there is a civil war of sorts going on within the Republican Party. There's a schism. There's the Trumplicans, and then there are the Republicans. It has kind of been beneath the surface here for the better part of a year, based upon specifically the president's COVID reaction. There were a number of Republicans who had kind of co-signed much of his economic agenda, much of his foreign policy agenda. They would do the whole back to blue, we're going to build a wall and what have you. But once it got to the point that a number of them started seeing the polls, that the president's response to, and I'm talking about not necessarily the never Trumper groups that morphed into the Lincoln Project, but I'm talking about some people who actually backed him on a local level, statewide level, that started to pull back some when they recognized that some of those races were in peril. And we're going to talk about Georgia in a minute just on that. Jason, what I want to ask you, though, is when you look at the schism that is happening, where there is a litmus test that has begun in the Republican Party amongst many of the rank and file, whereby if you don't back up Donald Trump and his fanciful, false, fallacious, mendacious, whatever other words you want to come up with to describe the claims that the election was stolen from him, that you are either a Republican in name only, a rhino, or you are a traitor. I had some fun with that on Facebook last night with regards to how people can't tell the difference between traitor and traitor. But with that in mind, Jason, talk to me a little bit about this schism in regards to how Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, these guys who have carried the president's water over the last 4 years are now having folks heckling them in the airports, threatening them back home. How does this impact you, Jason?
Well, excuse me. First of all, it doesn't impact me at all because it's hilarious to me. You know, it's like Malcolm X, said, it's just chickens coming home to roost. See, the Republicans they've been on, I'm sure they've been like on a purity test for like a decade and a half now. So anybody, who was like what a Republican typically was, could no longer get elected because, they would get primaried because if you were not for, the most outrageous thing possible, then you couldn't get elected. And they hitched their wagon to the crazies. Like it started out with the racists. They say, let's tap into this racist base, with Nixon and them, back in the 60s and early 70s. Let's ride that wave, to at least be competent, or competitive against Democrats. Then they switched over, then they added in, more crazies. So then it came, okay, so it's the racists. Then came the conspiracy theorist nuts that we have right now. And what happens is when you're getting elected and relying solely on insane people as your base, at some point you are not going to be able to control those people, and your party is going to be an insane place to be. And right now, that's what McConnell's dealing with. That's what Lindsey Graham is dealing with because they chose power over country and feeling like they could take the bull by the horns and guide that thing, and keep riding that same thing. It's impossible. You cannot reason with crazy. And now the whole part of his spiral, Trump is merely the outgrowth of what's been happening, since the 1980s, with Ronald Reagan. They've always been bringing in this crazy person, that crazy group. They had room for anybody who was willing to go along with nonsense. Now the party is nonsense, and they're trying to appeal to reasonable people, and it's not playing well. And that's why they all backtrack, and moonwalking like Michael Jackson back in 1984.
Yeah, no doubt about it on the backtrack. And I was joking last week. I know some of you may have seen it. One of my favorite movies is Inglourious Bastards. And, Aldo Rain and the Bastards would always cut the Nazi swastika into the foreheads of Nazis that they allowed to live because they wanted them, when the war was over, to go back to Germany and have a symbol of what it is that they used to do that they can't take off like a uniform. And while I'm not advocating any form of violence against anybody because that's not my style, at the same point in time, we have to rhetorically brand all of these Trump supporters that are politicians, because I am seeing it too. I am seeing even Ted Cruz trying to backtrack a little bit, like Michael Jackson at the Motown 25 doing the moonwalk back in 1983, on all of the water carrying that he has done for this president over the last 4 years. I'm like, no, sir, you've got to own it. You have to own up to what it is that you've done. And like you say, Jason, it's out of control. Ursula, I want to come to you with that too. In the last 24 hours, it looks as if Parler, we know that President Trump got suspended from social media. I have tired now of trying to explain what the First Amendment is to his supporters. I will no longer try to explain that anymore. They need to get a book. Google is your friend. Figure it out. But at the end of the day, private companies, for my followers, we all know private companies have a right to regulate who it is they allow to use their products, okay? As long as it's not discriminatory and some type of Title VII type situation, race, sex, gender, things of that nature. So yeah, they can shut him down. They all thought they were going to Parler, though. They were going to party over at Parler, and now Parler's shut down too. With that in mind, Ursula, how funny did you find it that they are now losing their voices, so to speak, to be able to foment all of the anger and vitriol that we are seeing out here in the social media streets until just this past week?
Oh, I think it's hilarious. And I do. And part of it is, I wonder if they have enough, I'm just going to say, if they have enough intelligence to even figure out another platform they could use. People are talking about, I think I saw somewhere recently where they said that they're supposed to be planning like demonstrations at 50 state capitals or something like that. How? Where? It's not on Facebook. It's not on Twitter. It's not on Parler. I mean, where? And so do you think these people will be able to find a platform between now and whenever to figure that out? I just don't see it, especially if they can't figure out that, Twitter, the right to free speech doesn't apply to Twitter and Facebook and all these other. If they can't figure that out, especially considering the First Amendment says Congress shall pass no law. If they can't figure that out fundamentally, I don't know how they could possibly figure out a platform that could host millions of people so that they could continue to push the lies and the conspiracy theories. I can't make those two points meet. I just can't. So, it is funny. I'm gonna tell you what's funnier though. These companies making these announcements that they're reviewing their political contributions, because let's be real about it. Republicans are funded by Fortune 500.
Mm-hmm.
They aren't funded by Jim Bob, who was at the Capitol last week. They're funded by Fortune 500. And so if Fortune 500 is no longer financing your foolishness, what happens then? So, I'm curious to see, how this all plays out, which companies are going to pull back. I don't know how sincere he was, but, I read somewhere where one of the Koch brothers said they really screwed this up, and they did. But I wonder how, whether or not he intends to put his money where his mouth is when it comes to contributions going forward. So he should have been embarrassed by Wednesday. As a matter of fact, we all should have been embarrassed by Wednesday.
Ursula, it's interesting that you say Jim Bob, because one of the funnier posts that I saw that was widely reported last week, so this is an innuendo or somebody just pulling something out of the air, is that as he watched the proceedings and was cheering on the proceedings from the tent last week and at the White House, that President Trump remarked that he felt that those followers of his were so low class that he kept making several comments about how they looked so low class. And again, and yet these ones will still, go to great lengths to show their affinity and loyalty to a man who has no love for or respect for them as persons. And it's so interesting.
Not at all.
Yeah. I mean, and the irony that some of these you'll take my guns from my cold dead fingers types. Well, some are actually dead now, so the guns have been removed from that way. And or you have the situation where there's such strong Second Amendment people. Well, when you're a convicted felon, you won't be able to bear arms at all. The ironies upon the ironies last week were just rich. Ayanna, I want to talk a little bit more because I know, again, that's your hometown up there in Washington, D.C. There's actually reports that they found bombs that were supposed to be detonated, I guess, near the Republican National Committee building, the DNC building as well. Again, as we move forward into next week, are you confident that your mayor and all of the officials in the DC metro area will be able to repel any attack should these militia members actually strive to come to the nation's capital and get what they always claim that they want, which is to get into armed conflict to stop the steal? Ayanna, what are your thoughts?
So I want to answer this in three different ways. I think that our mayor is, certainly prepared to respond accordingly. But as you know, and I think I've said this to a couple of people, we got 20 some different law enforcement agencies in the district. She has jurisdiction over Metropolitan Police. Metropolitan Police was not where the breakdown occurred with the attack last week. That was with the Capitol Police. That was with the literally the Library of Congress Police. With the other police forces, Supreme Court, all these different police forces that are sort of in this concentrated area. Also, the other issue was the National Guard. The mayor of DC does not control the National Guard. We have to send a request to the White House, and that was denied. It also came out that the governor of Maryland, who is a Republican, Larry Hogan, however, he is not a Trump supporting Republican, had offered National Guard troops to be sent into the city, and that was also denied. So I think that this time around, as we're looking forward to obviously a transition in administrations, I don't think that those denials will be part of the issue. I think that certainly if there's a request for the National Guard from the DC National Guard, as well as a offer of support from the jurisdictions next door, so between Maryland and Virginia, certainly we will get that support. I think also, obviously the bigger concern is looking at the Capitol Police Force and what they were unable to do. MPD certainly came in and provided backup. There are other police forces that can provide backup because, like I said, we have all these different agencies in the city. I think that what I've seen this week is that they obviously have a new police chief. It's a sister from Morgan State, and so my hope is that the support that she can support that she can put together will certainly make sure that our support is there. My daughter just jumped in, so I'm gonna stop talking.
What the heck are you on?
Hi, Princess. Yes, with that, while I want to segue, Monica, I see you put up the post about the FBI saying that they thwarted over a dozen folks who they determined posed an imminent threat. But what has also been hilarious to me, Monica, before I give you the mic, is the idea that when some of these ones have been caught, they're on that no-fly list now where they're being arrested or detained at the airports. They are sitting up crying like a toddler who just had their favorite toy taken. And so I'm like, what is it? Are you tough guys and tough girls, or are you soft? For all the shit they talk, just to call it a spade, when the real boys come up, it is time to get arrested. I'm seeing folks crying for their mamas. Monica, go ahead and take it.
So I will tell you that probably was, I ate a lot of popcorn since Wednesday. So yeah. Wednesday night, I had seasoned my popcorn, so I ate a whole lot of popcorn. But when I saw the no-fly list, I cannot tell you how much I laughed. You went to the Capitol. You committed a felony, and you think that so they flew into DC all pumped up on whatever they were pumped up, committed a crime against the federal government, and then thought they was gonna walk back to the airport and get on the plane and fly home. That is the epitome of white privilege, right? So I was seeing some post that someone talked about all these people were in favor of a travel ban at the beginning of Donald Trump's presidency, and now they are banned from traveling because y'all done committed a felony. So I have cackled sufficiently these, and I hate to say that because I recognize how bad it could have been. So I laugh at the tears that have been shed, but I'm also very concerned because Wednesday could have been a lot worse. Wednesday could have been a lot worse, and I want people's heads to be on the swivel. I live out in Trump country in Florida, and we heard gunshots last night. So I don't know how they're still communicating. I don't know how they're still communicating, and organizing is probably not as easy. But these folks are focused and they really feel disenfranchised, and they don't have a really good way of of projecting that or expressing that anger, and so they just rely on their guns. So I just want people's head to be on the swivel, because the 17th has been out there about them taking over the capitals in 50 states, and then the 20th. And so I said on Wednesday at the end of the day that this is not done. No, if you weren't arresting people and you weren't treating them white boys like you would have treated a whole bunch of black folks and just shooting them dead in the street, if that had been us,
yeah,
please understand it's going to happen again, because there's no consequence. And then the head insurrectionist and seditionist in charge is still in office. And if they don't do anything to have him receive some consequence for his bad behavior, then they're going to feel like they can do anything. So to answer your question, I chuckled about all the people crying about the fact that they couldn't fly. So I hope none of the people came from Washington or Alaska or Hawaii, because they're going to have a very difficult time getting back home since they can't get on the flight.
No doubt about it. And as we come to the close of the hour, again, ordinarily we run about an hour, but this is our special first show for the year. We will be back every Monday in our regular slots and discussing all of the salient issues of the day. But one of the things that I also wanted to make sure that we mention before we sign off here in a little bit and give everybody an opportunity to give their summation, each of the roundtable members, is the fact that we should not allow all of the traitorous anarchy last week to deflect from the fact that Morehouse brother Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff are heading to Washington, D.C. as the newly elected senators from the sovereign state of Georgia. Now, I am still somewhat surprised by it. I know we all fought for it. I know I donated to the campaign. I did for the Warnock campaign. I did all that I could in my platforms for the Warnock campaign and also for the Ossoff campaign. But I will admit here to all my watchers, I was going to do it and ride hard because that's what I do. But if you had asked me back in July whether Georgia would flip both of those Senate seats blue, I would have told you no. I wouldn't have believed it happened. And yet it happened. And we have to give all doubt and deference also to that powerful Spelman sister, Stacey Abrams. So I want to go around the round table right now and ask each of you, what were your thoughts with regards to those two monumental victories last week? And then I'll close out. Go ahead, Jason, you first.
It was huge. You're talking about July. I felt in November, I was like, man, we're going into runoff. Even though there's a chance, I really had no faith in the state of Georgia. And that's not a knock on Georgia. That's just what Georgia's been, for the vast majority of my life. But seeing them come through, excuse me, and deliver the Senate in the way that they did, to the Democrats, in that dramatic fashion amongst all this turmoil with COVID and Trump, calling secretaries and, a state and threatening people, all this stuff, to still have that come through. It just felt like it was something bigger than even humanity. It's almost like it was an intervention of some sort that came in, it's like make sure that on some kind of way, we save humanity. But to see that brother pull that off and be the first African-American, senator from the state of Georgia, that's amazing to me.
Absolutely, Jason. And I look forward to having you on some more. As you know that, I'm going to ride with the home team. Monica, what were your thoughts in regards to Georgia turning blue?
I actually was not surprised. I will say that I was surprised at the presidential race that Georgia turned blue. When I woke up on Wednesday and saw that Georgia hadn't turned red, I was like, okay. But after the election, I'm a person of faith. After the election, I was not shocked about the fact that that Warnock or Ossoff won, because I think that for the last 4 years, God's hands have been off this country, and it's always us. When I say us, I mean Black folks that have a tendency to be the moral compass for this country. And you can't. God's hands not going to be released from this country for so long. And so when Georgia turned blue, for me, I felt pretty confident that, or at least I thought at least one seat would happen. Warnock is the minister of Ebenezer Baptist Church. His mama picked cotton. The story is just such a beautiful story in terms of how he got to where he is. And then Ossoff was just icing on the cake. But I probably am one of the few people that felt pretty positive going into Tuesday and really feeling like us, like Black folks in Georgia, would absolutely get it done. And once I saw where the remaining votes were, it was a wrap. I went to bed Tuesday night saying, okay, they're gonna call this, just waiting on win.
Actually, I can vouch for that. I remember seeing your post. You were calling it long before the rest of us last week. So I tipped the figurative hat your way. With that, Ursula, what were your thoughts about Georgia? I know that you're a native Southerner, straight out of Mississippi. So you understand, just like we all do, actually, each of us on this panel tonight have roots in the Deep South. Ursula, you understand what it is that we were facing. At what point in time did you realize that it was actually a possibility that Georgia would send 2 Democratic senators to Congress?
I knew the day they released the video, the tape recording of Trump talking to the Secretary of State. And I'll tell you why I say that. I knew that tape would turn off 2 sets of people. The intelligent Republicans who knew what he did was over the line. And then for his followers, I figured they would probably want to punish the Republicans in Georgia for doing that to him. So I knew that those 2 groups of people likely would not be voting in this election. And if they did, they wouldn't be voting for Republicans because, that recording of that telephone conversation spoke volumes about who he was as a person. And, once again, if you listen to what he's saying, he's essentially threatening them. If you don't do this, I'll make sure you lose the election. That's essentially what he told them. And so, I think it worked. But this is the other thing, Chuck, and I've talked about this a lot. We don't know what color these southern states are. We don't know what color a lot of these states are because the people who can vote typically don't vote. So we really don't know. I mean, if you look at the voter turnout, we really don't know what these states could potentially be if people would just go out and exercise their right to vote. And so Georgia being blue really isn't number one. You remember, I think we talked about Stacey's election that she lost and the voter turnout in Fulton County. If Fulton County had turned out, Stacey would have won that election. But they didn't turn out, and I think part of it is, I think this past year kind of showed us the consequences of not voting. If it didn't show us anything else, I think that's what it showed us coming up to the presidential election. I think people learned how important their vote was. And so we don't, a lot of people were surprised that, they say it's a miracle. But we need to take that into account when we just decide to discount some of these other states like Texas, possibly even Florida, Mississippi, which has the highest percentage of African Americans in the country. We really need to start paying attention to what that really means and what the potential is, because we really don't know. So, I'm hoping that, what happened in Georgia will motivate other states to start looking and figuring out whether or not there's some opportunities that we are missing in these other states.
Absolutely. And Ayanna, I will give you the last word with regards to the impact of Georgia turning blue last Tuesday.
I mean, I think it's huge. And I just want to echo what Ursula said. I think that it just proves that we don't know what color the South truly is. I think that it's really more purple than it is red. I'm actually right after the Georgia race was called for Ossoff. I think maybe later that night after I sort of calmed down, I reached out to one of my friends who's an organizer in Mississippi. And I said, okay, I see on the horizon where you guys are next. And I know he and I were in law school together. He's been working to change Mississippi politics for 20 some years. And so I know that based on the work that I know that he's doing and other people who are in his same field, I expect to see our maps change over the course of the next 10 years. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. Georgia is huge. And I think that we just have to, see other states. I think North Carolina has turned purple in the past. I mean, Virginia turned purple. So we know that there are other states in that same, sort of in that traditional Southern, they used to be, deep red, ruby red. I think that they're definitely, there's a change on the horizon. So I'm looking forward to it.
Amen. And with that, I'm looking forward to further conversations with each of you, as well as the rest of the gang that we talk to almost 24/7 sometimes on our group chat. And I look forward to speaking to you again next week. And as we get ready to sign off, I thank each of you for watching us this evening. Be sure to share Hobbservation Point Live, as well as Front and Center, my new show that will be appearing almost on a weekly basis starting in the next 2 weeks. So with that in mind, go back and check out the first interview that I had with former Congresswoman Gwen Graham of Florida. And again, I have some great guests that are coming up, and I'm going to always have some great guests on these roundtables because I love showcasing so many of my brilliant friends who think very deeply about these issues that impact all of us. And with that in mind, continue to do your parts as well. You know, there are a lot of negative aspects to social media, but one of the more positive aspects is the ability for people to exchange ideas and actually make change in that way, be it through the exchange of ideas or actually motivating others to go out and mobilize and do the things that are necessary. I've heard a lot of great kudos given to our Spelman sister, Stacey Abrams. She deserves each one. Same for FAMU sister, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and so many other people who are not prominent in terms of names and having positions, but are out here in the streets doing the work to make sure that voter education is done and that registration drives are taken care of. We need that in each of these states. As Ayanna and as Ursula and Monica and Jason all said here this evening, it's important to remember that we can be the change. And so therefore, do your part to make sure that in the 2022 election, we can't rest on our laurels. We have to start getting ready right now because we know that the other side will be getting ready to do their part. So with that, again, thank you for tuning in for the first edition of Hobbservation Point Live for the 2021 year. And I look forward to seeing you again next Monday night. Take care.